Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to give this lecture, and thank you very much to Guru and David for accepting me as an associate at the AKPIA program, and also for Andras, who's just coming in, who helped me a lot in the last couple of weeks with accessing material at the collections of the Fine Arts Library here in Harvard. So I'm going to present ongoing research, and I'm going to sometimes read and sometimes just talk you through the slides. The topic for today is reading Timurid architecture and recent epigraphic restorations in Samarkand. So in my introduction, I would like to start that after 1991, political and cultural elites of independent Uzbekistan adopted Amir Timur as the epitome of Uzbek national identity. And Timurid heritage, in turn, has become a visual protagonist of a nationalist rhetoric. As a result, in 1996, the surviving Timurid monuments were restored for the celebration of Timur's 660th anniversary, and later on also in 2007 for the anniversary of Samarkand. And while the alluring persona of Timur is used as a symbol, meaning is produced through Timurid artifacts. These are the architectural monuments. And in this sense, their architectural and epigraphic restorations that I'm going to talk about today foregrounds the link between politics and symbolism within the ethno-nationalistic discourse. And Timurid architecture as part of the country's golden heritage. This is a term used in Uzbekistan. This is used to boost the Uzbeks' population's sense of belonging and pride to the construction of ethno-national identity. The socio-political importance of Timurid monuments remains largely unstudied. The last two major Western editions of Timurid architecture, the groundbreaking and still most comprehensive study by Lisa Golombek and Donald Wilbur, the Timurid architecture of Iran and Turan, and Bernard O'Kane's Timurid architecture in Khorasan, date back to the late 1980s. And the latest political Uzbek study, published in Russian, The Architecture of the Timurids by Shukur Askarov in 2009, stages Uzbekistan as the cradle of Renaissance across Eurasia. The most relevant publication for my research has been Professor Robert McChesney's study on Timur's tomb, Politics and Commemoration from 2003. Tsarist and Soviet restoration policies towards Timurid architecture have been discussed in articles by Charles Shaw, Igor Demchenko and Svetlana Gurshenina in the last 2 years. But they do not cover the post-Soviet period, and in particular the newly created epigraphy, and this is where my research comes in. Analyzed here as imaginary artifacts, the larger number of the recently restored sites and their epigraphy are not based on direct material evidence. And Timurid monuments are studied as a landscape of layered restorations whereby each political regime leaves its own mark based on its own ideology. So how I've structured this lecture is that firstly I will outline the importance of the Timurid cult and its role in the construction of collective memory from the middle of the 19th century until present. Secondly, I will show some examples of recent epigraphic restorations, and I'll finish with some ongoing restoration work carried out at Ishrat-Khaneh in Samarkand. So, in order to understand the profound impact of Uzbek urban renewal measures and programs, it is important to evaluate the role of Amir Timur as the pivotal figure of Uzbek collective memory. So the Timurid legacy in Golden Samarkand has been claimed for political purposes long before the creation of Uzbekistan as a republic in 1924. While some of the first European expeditions to Samarkand in 1841 set the eyes of Western connoisseurs on selected Timurid monuments, their travelogues were surprisingly deprived of information on the local population, on any indigenous stories or attitudes towards the architectural ruins. By the middle of the 19th century, most of the original architectural substance had been reused for the construction of new buildings, and the inhabitants of Samarkand were well aware of the spiritual importance of the sites. However, in the eyes of the cultured Western travelers, they had neglected their own heritage and have not succeeded in preserving these places. The official discourse of preservation started with General Konstantin Petrovich von Kaufmann after the capture of Samarkand in 1868. The civilized treatment of Islamic artifacts as introduced by the Turkestan administration was opposed to the presumed indifference of the local population in the preceding centuries. Kaufmann's restoration efforts established the role of the Russian Empire not only as the legitimate heir to Timur's architectural heritage, but also as a profoundly caring colonizer, attesting to local religious traditions and values. And the refurbishments of the monuments were related to urban development. Here you can see the main portal of the Gur-e-Amir, the Timurid dynastic mausoleum. So fences were put into place, and this is Registan Square, which was paved. This house to the south of the Ulugh-Bek Madrasa was removed, and all stores that we see on old pictures, you know, all these caravanserais that will pass here, they're all cleared from Registan Square. So the monuments were attributed a special role in the new imperial urbanization efforts. What is more, the purpose of these attempts was to instigate respect for the new ruling power among the Samarkand pious religious elites and masses. The publication of the first and only volume of the lavishly decorated catalogue, Mecheti Samarkand, or the Mosques of Samarkand, in 1905, edited by Veselovsky, was solely dedicated to Timur's mausoleum of Gur-e-Amir and financed by the empress herself, Alexandra Feodorovna. The prototype, so this is a prototype of an officially politicized edition on Timurid architecture, marks a new trend in the study of Timurid heritage. The monuments were not merely regarded as potential targets for urban renewal measures, but as a sort for comprehensive academic study, as an idealized work of art. And here you see some details from this large edition. Certain elements from Gur-e-Amir were taken out of their context, and they were represented as in ideal images, although there was some damage to the tile work. And here we see the muqarnas of the main portal, which was painted with precision. And also the texts were provided, but the most important about this edition is that it was exquisite. So it celebrated works of art. You know, architecture was treated as something very aesthetic, but the edition itself was also exquisite. And on the other hand, the cultural gap between this edition, to which only very limited amount of people had access, and the large masses of local population was also clearly propagated. Pankratiev, who photographed the monuments around 1890 under the patronage of Count Rostovtsov, describes the local guides, for example, as completely ignorant, I quote, unable to read and understand the Arabic inscriptions, as entertaining storytellers unaware of the exact construction dates and mistakenly attributing monuments of different patrons. Pankratiev stresses the fact that the local population talked with deep respect about Amir Timur as a builder of Islamic religious schools and mausoleums, although some of the actual surviving inscriptions confirm that those were built prior or after his reign. What happened with the advent of the Soviet ideology after 1918 was that for the first time a decree was issued by Vladimir Ilyich Lenin himself on the importance of conservation of cultural artifacts. This decree set the tone for the creation of museums and organizations dealing with the preservation of architectural heritage in the Soviet Union. And the first commission was established in Samarkand also in 1918. Its focus was on strengthening the northeastern minaret of the Ulugh-Bek Madrasa, and the commission was led by Vyatkin and two engineers, Mauer and Kostalsky. So after a very long process of engineering and political efforts, the minaret was finally restored in its vertical position in 1932. But it is important to understand that the efforts of these commissions that they established in the 1920s and the 1930s were actually based on attempts to stabilize the existing structures. So we had collapsing domes, we had minarets that were already tilted, and the Sredas Kumstaris, which was established in 1925, was responsible for the conservation of all Central Asian republics. And this is a picture of the members of the Sredas Kumstaris, who were the first people who would study Timurid architecture in a more academic way. So here we have Bartold. We have Zasipkin, the architect, who invested a lot of effort into the first half of the 20th century restoring Timurid architecture. We have Umnyakov standing. This was Nechkin, the president of Sredas Kumstaris, and this was Semenov. We all know Semenov's publication on the epigraphy of the Timurid cenotaph at Gur-e-Amir, his publications at Epigraphic of Vostoka. But what is interesting to know is that while these educated in the Soviet Union scholars were actively engaged in intellectual efforts in restoring and created drawings, they were juxtaposed to these local masters who are depicted here in their traditional clothes and were also celebrated as heroes of the Soviet Union. So we have on the one side the Sovieticized elite and the local craftsmen who were all involved in the restoration efforts through also late 1920s, 1930s. While in Samarkand in 1937 a new school opened that taught old building and decoration techniques also employed in Timurid architecture, and Zasipkin, that I just previously showed, developed a manual together with local craftsmen on the construction methods, including the building of vaults and the design of geometrical patterns. And this manual contained 238 drawings, so it was used actually as a textbook for restoration purposes. So attracting local craftsmen and exploiting their knowledge of all the building techniques could be also seen as a political move to integrate local collaborators who are not treated anymore as backward or ignorant, as opposed to the pre-Soviet policies in Central Asia. And this is also encouraging the historic preservation. This was an ideological attempt called Krayevidenie in the early Soviet Union, in which the potential of local people had to be exploited in order to preserve knowledge and traditions. However, the Russian architects and archaeologists had a leading role in these collaborative projects, and their activities were regarded as a social obligation and also as a contribution to the preservation of the rich architectural heritage across Central Asia. What is probably interesting is to mention that in 1941, I mean, you all know about the opening of Gur-e-Amir. And although the reasons why they decided to open Gur-e-Amir, which popularized Timur as a figure in the Soviet Union, are not quite clear. There are some views that Stalin was interested in Amir Timur because he associated with him. He was also crippled, had these megalomaniac military ambitions. But the decision actually was taken for intellectual purposes in order to prove is Amir Timur buried in Gur-e-Amir or not, and what could we learn from by proving this. So a commission was established and Gur-e-Amir was opened in 1941, in which Timur's skeleton was exhumed and studied, and Gerasimov studied the skulls of Amir Timur and of Ulugh-Beg, here with Kirinyazov, who was the chairman of the commission, and Kirinyazov was one of these representatives of the new Uzbek elite who had also accomplished quite renowned status within the Communist Party. These pictures are taken from a film that was shot during the opening of Gur-e-Amir and is available online. What was the outcome of the opening of Gur-e-Amir is that actually the Gerasimov, these are pictures taken from the article of Gerasimov, reconstructed the faces of Amir Timur and of Ulugh Beg. And this set a new, completely different discourse on Timur as a nomadic warlord, and on Ulugh Beg as this cultured, sophisticated, knowledgeable astronomer. So we have Timur with his military helm, and we have Ulugh Beg also in a more recent depiction, Ulugh Beg in his library in Samarkand. But the image of collective memory was strengthened by Ulugh Beg, who became the patron of Soviet state propaganda. And he was this scholar and astronomer, a cultured patron, who was opposed to the military and nomadic aspect of Timur. Industrial development in Central Asia was high on the Soviet political agenda, and the importance of local educated elites and intelligentsia was needed for the promotion of the Soviet model also in the 1950s. So Ulugh Beg was used as this propagator of local potential. So he was not threatening to the Soviet propaganda in the sense that he did not have any military ambitions, but he was carrier of a cultural traditions that was hoped that these backward nomadic Central Asian people will be able to promote in the Soviet Union. As a result, this discourse on Ulugh Beg had an impact on the Ulugh Beg Madrasa at Registan Square, because this was the first monument that was actually rebuilt for the first time during the Soviet period. We have pictures from the beginning of the 20th century that the northern facade and the south facade of the Ulugh Beg Madrasa were completely destroyed. And in the 1950s, the madrasa was rebuilt, and its epigraphic program was a new design. And what we have nowadays at the Ulugh Beg Madrasa are actually mainly hadiths on knowledge, professing the idea of knowledge. So this is my point, that during the Soviet period, this was the building that celebrated knowledge, because it was related to Ulugh Beg as this carrier of the idea of a knowledgeable, sedentary ruler. And also here we have Khrushchev, who visited Central Asia and took his picture in front of the Ulugh Beg Madrasa. Also there are pictures of Brezhnev in front of the madrasa. And Uzbekistan, unlike the other Central Asian Soviet republics like Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, was elevated from the rest. Not only because it had the Timurid heritage, but because it was seen as this cradle of cultured socialism. And also tourists from the other Central Asian republics were brought to Uzbekistan. I mean, local Soviet tourists, but also they organized conferences and large international events where people of other, brotherly socialist countries were paraded across Registan Square. So this brilliant grandson was opposed to the cruel conqueror Amir Timur, and the national discourse changed, because in 1973 Amir Timur was completely deleted from the Central Asian history. In 1973, an official decision was taken by the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Uzbekistan that condemned Amir Timur. And based on that document, all the copies of Yazdi Zafarnameh were confiscated and burned in the courtyard of the FAM publishing house in Tashkent. Muminov's book, Role and Place of Amir Timur in the History of Central Asia, was also condemned. In this regard, all publications revealing any positive side of Timur's deeds were banned. And during the Soviet period, Timur was not considered an Uzbek national hero, as he was an illiterate statesman and a devout Muslim. Accordingly, Timurid monuments were not restored in his honor. However, they were celebrated as achievements of indigenous deafness within the USSR and their restoration with steel and reinforced concrete in the late in the 1960s and 70s were the climax of socialist technological progress combined with local craftsmanship. I would like to proceed to the independence period, where in 1991 Uzbekistan rejected completely this Soviet Marxist ideology and replaced it with the Timurid card. The Uzbekified Turkic steppe conqueror Timur became the national hero. And the powerful personality of Timur and his megalomaniac architectural ambitions made him a popular figure among post-Soviet political elites. They in turn elevated the status of Timur as the father of the Uzbek nation. Since Timurid monuments belong to all Uzbeks and their maintenance is solely in the hands of the state, they are not tantamount to any political party or platform, and in modern Uzbekistan, state policy is propagated through the collective memory of the Timurid cult. And I just want to finish this section of the presentation with a quote from the President Karimov. The name of Amir Timur was blacked out from the pages of our history in an attempt to bury him in oblivion. The goal was to remove the national consciousness from the soul of the people so that it might lose its sense of national pride and reconcile itself to its dependence and subordination. And our people, trapped for so many years in the clutches of the colonial vice, are no longer deprived of the opportunity to honor our great compatriot and render to him his historical due. So aside from Timur's rehabilitation as a national hero, the value of the Timurid cult lies in an attempt to evoke pride among the Uzbek nation and also to elevate the primacy of the Uzbek nation. And as a result, the statehood legacy of Amir Timur is the flagship of the modern Uzbek state. This is the figure of Amir Timur that was erected in 1993 on the main square in Tashkent, which had previously figures of Stalin, Lenin, Karl Marx. So it just repeats, the ideology, ideological place with a new figure. So now I would like to proceed with examples of the restoration work that's being done. You all know this is the Timurid dynastic mausoleum of Gur-e-Amir, in which Timur himself is buried, and together with his sons Ulugh-Bek, his grandson Ulugh-Bek, his son Miran-Shah and Shah Rukh. This main portal was built by Ulugh-Bek in 1435. And I would like to focus on two recent epigraphic restorations on the main portal and here on the courtyard facade. Gur-e-Amir has been always the place to start restorations if anyone wanted to deal with Timurid architecture in Samarkand. Gur-e-Amir was the first place to receive money for restorational efforts. So the first thing that was done to the mausoleum in the 1940s was that the dome was restored. And I mentioned previously the opening of Gur-e-Amir. As a result of that opening, Stalin gave 1 million rubles for the reconstruction of Gur-e-Amir in 1943. And in 1943, immediately with this money, the dome of Gur-e-Amir was completely renewed. What you see here is a picture before the restoration, and this is the picture from the present state of the monument. Actually, we have the only cross section that we have of the Gur-e-Amir dome was from this folio from 1905 from the mosques of Samarkand, and you can see that if this is the outer shell of the inner dome, so we have a double dome with Gur-e-Amir. We had this brick pedestal from which wooden ribs would stretch, and these are side walls that will support the inner shell of the second dome. Here in the cross section that was published by Masson, you see the crypt. The roof of the crypt was also restructured in 1920, but only it was the roof was supported by a beam so that it won't collapse to preserve the upper part of the mausoleum. what happened with the reconstruction of the dome was that in 1943 a new this pillar was removed, and here an octagonal pyramid was installed. These are pictures of the reconstruction of the monument. Pictures were taken in 1947. So this pyramid was installed above the inner dome, from which the side walls were stretched, and the pyramid was considered to be a better method because it will take any earthquake tremors better than the only pillar in the middle of the dome. But you can still see that the courtyard facade was, nothing was done to the courtyard facade, and the main portal here established by Ulugh Beg was tilted. During the Soviet period, this model was created based on Pletnev's reconstruction of Gur-e-Amir as a complex. I mean, you all know this, consisting of two Iwan madrasa, consisting of a dome khanqa, and the octagonal mausoleum with this very characteristic dome on a high cylindrical drum. So based on that plan, Gur-e-Amir was considerably refurbished in 1996 for the celebrations of Timur's birthday. These two minarets were rebuilt. The one had collapsed in 1897 as a result of a major earthquake in Samarkand, the other one in 1903. The courtyard facade was rebuilt and partly restored. The dome was partially retiled, and this entrance Iwan, which was stabilized as part of the restoration in the 1950s by Notkin, was also stabilized. But what is interesting here is that although the Muqarnas was here recreated, we have bare brick, so it is very clear which structure is original and which structure has been added. This changed, however, in 2008 as a result of the celebrations of Samarkand, this 2,750th birthday. So now we have these very sophisticated, lengthy celebrations completely made up. And new epigraphy appeared on Gur-e-Amir, and also the inside of the mausoleum was restored. I'm not going to go through the inside of the mausoleum, only these two, just to show you that also the cenotaphs were replaced. We see here in the old picture we had gips cenotaphs, and this will be Ulugh Beg and Shahrukh. About the courtyard facade, new epigraphy was created. This is Surah Al-Mulk, and it opens with here, just to give you an idea. So Surah Al-Mulk starts from the side of the courtyard facade, and in the here there is some original inscription that has been restored several times, and I'm now trying to reconstruct the text of this inscription and to see whether, you know, Surah Al-Mulk had any relevance to it, because I assume it didn't. That's why the surah starts with ayah 1 to 4, and then after the inscription here continues with ayat 8 to 26. And above the main portals we have ayat 11 until 15, and the final verse is 26. But until the knowledge is with Allah only. So usually if you use Surah Al-Mulk, it will be, I mean, there are only 30 verses, and it will make sense to use all 30 verses. So on the epigraphic band, so I don't know why they chose not to do that. Why they chose to split the verse until 26. And it's very probably interesting to say that the inscriptions were created based on some models that the president himself is involved with. And exactly the text that goes here above the main portal is from the surah is about how people should be should adhere to Islam, but should also subvert onto the authority. And I think this authoritative aspect of Surah Al-Mulk might have played a role. As far as the inscription, reconstruction of the inscription on the main portal, we have Surah Al-Imran, the family of Imran, in verse 104, and there may spring from you a nation who invite to goodness and enjoy right conduct and forbid indecencies, such are they who are successful. This restoration, I thought, was added here in 2008 with the importance of the word nation, which in the Arabic text will be Ummah, you know, it's the community, the Islamic community. And I thought this was an idea to somehow stress the importance of creating a new nation in Uzbekistan in accordance with this discourse on nation building. But then I discovered that actually this text appears, this is again the surah, and it's introduced by said God, the Blessed and the Exalted, which this text only appears on the lower part on the original inscription from the time of Uzbek. But then I discovered that actually this surah appears on the Barakhan Madrasa in Tashkent, and I think probably that there might have been some connection between the Barakhan Madrasa and the usage of the surah, the choice of the president to use this surah in Samarkand. And I will briefly like to show you my idea why this also has appeared in 2008 and not earlier. This is the Barakhan Madrasa, which is in Tashkent, and it celebrates the Shaybunid ruler, the first Shaybunid ruler. It has a mausoleum here on the longitudinal axis with the mausoleum of the first Shaybunid ruler. But as you can see on the front facade, we have some very obscure domes. And this all changed in 2007 when Tashkent was declared one of the 4 cultural capitals of Islam. President Karimov created a new complex around the Barakhan Madrasa called Hast Imam. And the Barakhan Madrasa was adorned with 3 domes, these 2 on the front facade looking onto the square, and 1 dome above the main mausoleum. So the president built his mosque in the main axis of the Barakhan Madrasa. This is an image of the mosque of the president, again mirroring these 2 domes on high drums, blue glazing, very reminiscent of Timurid morphology. All the square was cleared. These are all old town of Tashkent. The houses were completely demolished. This is the view of the facade of the mosque of the president looking onto the square. Another interesting feature was that the library, which used to be opposite the Barakhan Madrasa, and I must say that the Barakhan Madrasa was the seat of the only mufti in Central Asia, and probably the text which was on the Barakhan Madrasa had something to do when it was chosen in the 1950s with the creation of an Islamic community, because this was the administrative headquarters of the Islamic community in Central Asia. So the library of the Mufti and of the Islamic Institute was in this building from the Russian period, where which had one treasure, and this was the Uthman Quran. The Uthman Quran was kept in this glass case. I took this picture in 2006, just months before the building was destroyed. And now the Uthman Quran, I think, plays a very important role in this whole new ensemble of Hast Imam, because it's kept in this madrasa, which is in the middle of the square. So we have the Barakhan Madrasa Shaybunid monument with Timurid morphological elements. We have the new mosque of the president, and we have the Uthman Quran in the center of this large square. And while President Karimov, I think, is using these the three domes on the Barakhan Madrasa in very direct relation to the Bibi-Khanym mosque, because we know that the Bibi-Khanym mosque is the only monument with 3 domed chambers. We have one main sanctuary to the west with the mihrab and the qibla wall, and we on the longitudinal axis, and we have two dome chambers on the north-south axis. So I think that there was a very clear ideological attempt in creating the new center of Tashkent and adding to it some kind of Islamic superiority, also by using the Uthman Quran. About the Bibi-Khanym mosque, because I wanted to show that the trend that I mentioned at the beginning about the efforts of the early Soviet period of only strengthening the structures but not doing any additional restoration work can be clearly seen in these images of Bibi-Khanym mosque. You can clearly see that probably some of you have visited the sites before 1996 when this picture was taken, but although there were really commissions involved in the restoration of Bibi-Khanym, and it was a very lengthy process, the actual work was carried out after independence. And in particular, the restoration of this sanctuary Iwan. The first drawings, or the first attempts to recreate the monument were made already in the 1940s. And this is a reconstruction proposed by Razzia, in which we see this very elongated pishtach with an epigraphic band and with two tall side minarets. Well, there is no material evidence that this epigraphic band existed, but these reconstruction of Razzia was actually utilized for really, for the reconstruction of the Bibi-Khanym mosque. This was the model that was published in 1988, just before the Uzbek independence. And apart from designing, making simply drawings of the Timurid monument, a trend that was set by Razzia, and it was later on carried on by Pugachenkova and by Krykov, there were also attempts to geometricize Timurid architecture. And you're familiar with the book by Bulatov, Architectural Harmonization. It had 3 editions. Well, Bulatov based his measurements on the golden section and introduced, different measurements for the creation of arches. Bibi-Khanym was not reconstructed based on Bulatov. It was reconstructed based on the ideas by Krykov, and Krykov is probably not quite popular in the Western literature as a person who was involved in the restoration of Timurid architecture in Uzbekistan, but I think he played a major role on the reconstruction not only of the Bibi-Khanym but also of Registan Square, and how this epigraphic band was in a way justified through playful geometry is that the opening between the 2 pylons of the portal of the main sanctuary to the west, this distance was used as a diameter of a circle inscribed here between the base of the opening and the arch, and they took the 2 adjoining minarets to inscribe everything in a square and a circle based on this measurement, which I think is actually, is just an attempt, a playful attempt to use geometry if you want, to play in a free time. But this is not realistic as any attempt. You can always fit something in a circle and in a square, but this had. Well, I'm sorry that I put it so bluntly, but this had an impact on the creation of the facade and on the fact that the main dome, which had collapsed in 1897, cannot be seen anymore. Because I think that this facade is elongated in order to, somehow fit it into this geometrical structure proposed by Krykov. And this led, of course, to the creation of the epigraphic band, which reveals Surah Al-Baqarah and these ayats 127 and 128, where again we have a nation submissive unto thee and show us our ways of worship. So this idea of the Ummah, of the Islamic community, appears on the text of Bibi-Khanym. We have the epigraphic band that was completed in 1996. Of course, well, I assume that the idea also of using Abraham and the idea of trying to approach also different communities which live in Uzbekistan, Islamic Jewish communities, might have played a role in the selection of this text. But I wanted to stress the fact of selecting verses from the Quran using the word nation or ummah. But what happens further with Bibi-Khanym is that this text, which was used at the main sanctuary, is not only used at the main sanctuary of Bibi-Khanym, it's also used at Shahrisabz. And this is the Kokumbas mosque built by Ulghbek in Shahrisabz, which was again restored after independence. We have, I think this picture was taken by Lisa Gollenbeck, but I'm not sure about this. Anyway, in 1960. So what we see here is that we have three superimposed blind niches, arch niches. And what we see here is that these niches are all of a sudden four, and the whole spandrels in the spandrel area here above the arch is increased in order to accommodate, you know, this inscription, which is again in Toulouse, and it's again the same text from Bibi-Khanym. But it didn't stop there. The same text went on to the Kalan Mosque in Bukhara. And in the Kalan Mosque, we had this lengthier pishtach, and this epigraphic, presumably epigraphic band was existent there. At least the space for incorporating a calligraphic band was existent. But my question is why the same text will be added on three different monuments from three different periods, and what is the logic behind it? So this is, as I said, I'm presenting now my research in progress, and I'm trying to find out what was the incentive behind the selection of text, but also behind the decision to well, copy-paste, I mean, it doesn't sound very academic, but this is what happened, copy-paste similar epigraphy monuments with different history. Now, about Bibi-Khanym, the monument is actually, it's very sad because the monument is a very bad state of repair, and at the moment there is restoration work going on. So this will be the southern domed sanctuary, and Bronwyn Gokis, she's been recently to Samarkand, and she said that actually restoration has already started here in this part of the mosque. And something that I didn't mention was that UNESCO has had also an important role in the sense that they cannot interfere with the politics of Uzbekistan, but they issued a recommendation for the creation of a master plan. And as a result of this master plan for Samarkand, a certain amount of money was distributed to the Bibi-Khanym mosque for the restoration and upkeep of the mosque, and this amount is about $400,000, and it has to be utilized by 2015. This is according to the plan. So you know what Bronwyn saw in Samarkand, it's probably, you know, utilization of this money for the upkeep of the mosque. Because, as I said, it's in pretty bad shape. This is the back side of the sanctuary to the west. When I first saw the sanctuary in 2006, this external epigraphy in the Banai technique was intact. And actually, this is a Soviet restoration. You can see this in the difference of the colors of the bricks. You know, the lighter bricks are the Soviet restoration. And it had fallen apart in 2013. This is the picture taken in 2014 when the scaffolding was set up, presumably to restore the monument. But I think that the impact on this has this very busy road, because this is the Shahrisabz Bazaar, and all these cars, you know, they create tremors, they create pollution, and the proximity of this busy bazaar next to the Bibi-Khanym mosque has a very detrimental impact on the fabric of the monument. In order to elevate the road in the old city center, this new road was built as part of the urban development in Samarkand in 2006. This road, as you can see, goes very close, runs very close to the Shahrisabz necropolis, one of the masterpieces of Timurid architecture. This is just to give you an idea how dramatically the landscape has changed and how close the road runs next to Shahrisabz. Now, because I don't have so much time, I would like very briefly to focus on some restorations that were done here on the main portal of Shahrisabz on the Dargah, and also on the Double Dome Mausoleum, both monuments associated with the period of Ulugh-Beg. Well, again, we have, this is a picture taken by Prokurin-Gorsky from the beginning of the 20th century. We have these Timurid monuments, which I think have been completely transformed in the post-independence Uzbekistan, because their morphology has changed. I think they were sturdier and they were lower, and by increasing these side niches, you know, simply adding up side niches, and by creating the epigraphic bands on top, their proportions have changed. So this is the portal in 1989. You can see that attempts have been made to restore this Quranic band that in the Banai technique that runs along the portal. And we had in the previous picture, this was a rectangular blind niche, and now it's an arched blind niche. The text here on the Kufic text is glory to Allah and everlastingness. What happened in 2005 for the restoration of Shahrisabz is that this was further elongated. So extra two-imposed niches were added, and this epigraphic band was created, and the inscription was further, you know, went up. This is also the new epigraphy, is from Surah 3, Al-Imran, verse 169. Think not of those who were slain in the way of Allah as dead, nay, they're living with their Lord, they have provision. So the living, Shahrisabz being the necropolis of the living king, you know, I think this has to do with the idea of Shahrisabz. And this ayah 169 was simply, you know, the following ayah was repeated here 170 at the back of the portal. This is and this is the text in Kufic that runs on top. The Double Dome Mausoleum, what were the changes that were being made to it? We have the plan and the cross section on the longitudinal axis with the main portal to the south, opening on the main axis of Shahrisabz. We have the main mausoleum at the back with very elongated cylindrical drum. The drum is taller than the dome itself. And we have the double dome on the larger chamber. The additions that were done in the restoration of Shahrisabz in 2005-2006 was that the portals on the two intersecting axes were added. Here we have the portal to the east, where it was added an arched portal with blind niches, and we have this portal to the south. Well, actually, there are no. This is the epigraphy on the portal, which deals with the parenting and with being, keeping old age and cherishing your parents. So I think this is rather strange, choosing this text, because presumably the Double Dome Mausoleum was for the wet nurse of Ulugh-Beg, and there are two females buried in the mausoleum. Whether this has to do with the parenting or cherishing of parents, I'm not sure. But this has the cherishing of parents has also a very clear line within the Uzbek discourse on creating stable families and cherishing your parents, and there are posters about this care along the Uzbek streets in the larger cities. So this might be used also in a kind of propaganda, attempt for creating respect for parents. But I just wanted to show, that only this portal, only the pylon to to the east was available. So there is absolutely no evidence of inscriptions, of the choice of inscriptions. When I saw the Double Dome Mausoleum, it was being replastered, but it was replastered in such a bad way that chunks of plaster had already fallen on the ground. And this dado was restored also in 2005. But I was shocked by this door, which was being inserted on a wall of a early 15th century mausoleum at Shahrisabz. And it was so recently inserted that not even the plastic here had been taken out. So I think this is something really bad and really dramatic that's going on, and I just want to talk about this in order to show you, what's going on. About the Shahrisabz and the restoration, not only new epigraphy was added, but actually new mausoleums were being built. So these, in 2005, these two mausoleums, actually below these mausoleums, there were Karahanid mausoleums from the 10th century, which were discovered by Nemtseva, but they were completely obliterated with these new constructions in 2005. And also the Nemtseva, you probably know, she excavated the Royal Karahanid Madrasa opposite the Kutham Abbas burial site, and this there was a portal. I mean, she disclosed the portal of the Karahanid Madrasa, an existent Iwan on the longitudinal axis. Well, the portal was completely destroyed in 2005, and there are images of the destruction of the portal, and she said that she was standing there. I mean, I had one kind of informal interview with her. She was standing there and she couldn't do absolutely nothing. I mean, she was not even asked to be an advisor or to participate in this restoration effort. This is how the new mausoleums look like, and what is, I think, absurd is this mausoleum has a shop, and in the other mausoleum there is actually a museum commemorating the restorations, and these photographs are around the walls in this very small mausoleum, and there is a large model of Shahrisabz depicting the necropolis after this major restoration in 2005. What's going on to the tile mosaic? The arabesques. Well, there's not much left from them. I mean, they're simply being painted because there is probably enough funding at the moment. The funding has gone to the Bibi-Khanym mosque and to the Ishrat Khane, and all these techniques, I think these are actually Soviet or early independence restorations, but now not even this effort is being taken. I mean, simply before the tourist season, these are repainted, and you can see different shades of paint. You see different shades of blue, different shades of green, so this is being repainted over and over again. About some what I call peculiarities of epigraphic restoration. This is a minaret of the Shirdar Madrasa. This is the minaret looking onto the Tilakari Madrasa, which will be here. And I don't understand why these tiles were put here, because in 1962 an effort was made in order to create a scaffolding to reconstruct the minaret in order to restore it. But they used these kind of tiles with scribbles on them. I mean, there was nothing sensible. So I wonder why would they take the effort. Another peculiarity which I briefly want to mention is the using of Cyrillic script in epigraphy. So this is the madrasa of Nadir Divan Bagi, which is also has on the side of Hoja Akhrar, and here we have the date of the restoration, and we have the name of the restorer, Mustafa Huluf. So in this script, which was Cyrillic, but had the typography of Arabic script, and was used and introduced to Soviet Central Asia in the 1950s after the campaign in the late 30s on changing the script to Cyrillic in order to kind of assure the local population, well, we do acknowledge your traditions, we're going to use Cyrillic with these curls emanating Islamic texts. Now, very briefly, because I mentioned the new funding for the Ishrat-Khaneh, I want to show how restoration is going on. The Ishrat-Khaneh is also a mausoleum from the late Timurid period, from 1464, and it does not fall within the city center of Samarkand. It's to the southwest. This is how it looks nowadays. The main portal with the large pishtak. The main dome had disappeared. It collapsed in 1903. And here you can see, I took these pictures in 2013. You can see the new restoration work. We can see whether the new brick has been added. These are the plans that were published in 1958 by Pugachenkova of the reconstruction of the main facade of the Ishrat-Khaneh. And actually, I think that these plans, if you can see here, this modern reconstruction of the Ishrat-Khaneh, are actually literally used and are going to be used for the rebuilding of the monument. So, although here you see UNESCO, this is not a UNESCO monument. And these are the plans of creating Ishrat-Khaneh with a garden and basically opening it up to tourists. This is the restoration that I took photographs of in 2013. The Ishrat-Khaneh has 3 octagonal axes, and to the southeast there is a gallery with four dome chambers, and this was actually taken in this gallery. I showed you the reconstruction by Pugachenkova, this reconstruction published in 1958. In the book there are the plans and also some drawings. So in one of the drawings we see this combination of blue and gold, which actually cannot be found in the very bare remains of what you can see as decoration at Ishrat-Khaneh. But this is so it's probably advanced in the meantime. And now, just to finish off and to show you how this probably might look in the future, we have a system of intersecting arches here in the Ishrat-Khaneh, in which the arches create this kind of shield-like transition zones and open up the space of the monument. The arches, they then create a very shallow 16-pointed dome. This is a very innovative structure that is used also in the Aksaray in Samarkand, and also at the mausoleum of Gur-e-Amir in Herat. Just to show how Ishrat-Khaneh might look like in a couple of years from now, I would like to show Aksaray in Samarkand. This is situated just behind Gur-e-Amir, and these are drawings by Soviet scholars published also in 1988 on the restoration of this arch system and this vaulting at Aksaray. These are images of the restoration work when everything was gilded. And this is how the ready product looks like at the moment. So this is the shallow dome, and you can see here these shield-like segments and the Mukarnas transition zones. So these are the corners of the square plan. You see that everything is gilded. And everything has been, the stuccos has been restored and repainted, and there is epigraphy all around the mausoleum. Well, I haven't been to Aksaray when it was, before it had been restored, and I don't know what was the state of the vaulting, what was the state of the epigraphy. But if you have any pictures of the original state, I'll be very interesting to have a look at them in order to compare. All I'm saying is that because of the similarity in the vaulting between Aksaray and Ishrat-Khaneh, it might be possible that very soon we have the same designs there. So I would like to finish now with my talk in very brief conclusion. like heritage as a cultural construct, is intrinsically linked to the process of selection. And although the Timurid architectural heritage was recognized as an important source for promoting cultural potential of Central Asia, the prevailing majority of the monuments were not restored, as I have shown during the Soviet period. But the early restoration attempts focused mainly on conservation by stabilizing endangered structures, collapsing vaults, and minarets. The choices on what to restore were made by knowledgeable committee members of the Sredoskum Staris and Uskum Staris, and new additions to the morphology of the buildings were executed in brick without decoration. Non-existing domes were indeed rebuilt in reinforced concrete in order to counteract the frequent earthquakes in the region. And in 1950s, handcrafted tiling was used and manually applied to the reconstructed parts. Later in the 1980s, manufactured concrete frames were utilized. Yet the whole restoration process was extremely lengthy. It was carefully planned and executed by teams of archaeologists and architects. This changed, however, after 1991, when Timurid architecture was branded as the Renaissance of the East, and Timur's legacy was seen as a spiritual fundament of the great future of modern Uzbekistan. Throughout the 2 decades of Uzbek independence, Timurid monuments have been considerably rebuilt, and these renovations have changed the urban fabric of the cities on a large and unprecedented scale. The presented restorations disclose the fact that the government makes conscious choices regarding the elevation of certain sites directly related to Timur. Since the monuments are not owned by the state, public funds are used for their restoration, which involves not only conservation but also new morphological and epigraphic additions not based on material architectural evidence. Such local practices raise the more general question of authenticity of architectural heritage and the role of UNESCO in preserving it. The fact that the major restorations in Uzbekistan have taken place after the UNESCO listing, because Samarkand was listed in 2001, points to the fact that the role of international organizations is restricted, and furthermore the usage of heritage as a marketable commodity for the sake of tourism leads to the commercialization of the historical past, which has a detrimental and irreversible impact on the architectural artifacts. Herewith, I would like to raise the questions, if we assume that the building itself is the only unbroken record, how did the political meanings attached to the monument change its fabric, and how do we approach the analysis of this fabric? What is the relationship between ownership of heritage and power, and how do we define their boundaries? How do we assess the dynamic interplay between heritage and the present? And although the collective memory is exploited as a tool to idealize the past, the practice shows that heritage is actually a product of the present. Thank you.